All right. Sorry about that. I accidentally hit the end broadcast button as I was trying to remove myself from my phone because basically it all comes back to my internet issues and Xfinity is on my shit list as I was telling Chris here. But sorry about that. We're gonna jump right into the conversation we were having, which is Jimmy Garoppolo. And Chris, I agree with you. You were talking about the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo is he's not exactly in the tier one of quarterbacks and what teams would consider, as a quarterback needy team. At least not first. You wait for the Aaron Rodgers, right? You wait for the maybe even the Derek Carr. I don't know. That I feel like Derek Carr and Jimmy Garoppolo. It's like
Right.
whatever flavor you prefer that day. I don't know, but yeah, I get your point. Like Jimmy Garoppolo may, who knows where he ends up. But the good thing is, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter anymore where he ends up. I'm just like curious, right?
Yeah, me
But
too.
for the 49ers, it's like he's not our problem anymore, and okay, problem, maybe that's harsh. I'm sorry. But you know what I mean? Like
Oh, of
as
course,
far
like
as
the
what to do
drama
with
and all that.
him,
Yeah.
yeah, as far as like what to do with him in the off season, that's no longer an issue for the 49ers. Now, what is an issue is what to do with Trey Lance and Brock Purdy, because
Yeah.
now that becomes a new quarterback discussion here. And, Kyle Shanahan said that he felt like they had two starters on their team in Trey Lance and Brock Purdy. So what do you think this all kind of means? I obviously Purdy is on the shelf for now. His timetable for his surgery is looking at about 6 months, and he was going to have a better idea. I think today he was going to finalize his decision on what he was going to be doing. He's been consulting with different doctors, this past week or so. So today he's supposed to make a decision as to what he's going to end up doing. But that leaves Trey Lance with an opportunity to really kind of, prove himself a little. He'll have the offseason to himself to be QB1, show what he has, right? So, how do you see this shaking out for both Trey Lance and Purdy?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely it plays to Trey Lance's advantage. Not I would have not hoped this injury, obviously, on Brock Purdy. But to your point, it sounds like Shanahan and Lynch in their end of season presser was talking about how looks like 6 months, 3 months after surgery, he can start rehabbing and getting his arm strength back. And then, like at 6 months, he should be 100%. But of course, that's barring, no setbacks. That's barring issues during surgery, no infection, no everything is like being perfect, right?
Hmm.
Which, the other example of this similar surgery was when Nick Mullins did it a couple of years ago, and he was, solid. He got picked up, I think, by the Browns, maybe immediately, not immediately, but shortly thereafter when he was able to throw again and stuff. So, but that being said, with that timetable, of course, as you mentioned, Purdy would miss the offseason program, the OTAs, and would come back like right at the beginning of training camp, really, right? So, considering that from a rookie year to their sort of second year is when a lot of growth happens, being able to work on mechanics and just, continue to work out and lift and so on. He's kind of, his development in that regard on its own is already going to be delayed. And of course, with the opportunity that Lance will have during OTAs and then even all those independent practices, like I think a couple of years ago, they went out to like Nashville and stuff when we're throwing and
Yeah.
everything. That gives definitely a leg up to Trey Lance, right? I think that we're not going to know, obviously. You know how Shanahan does this. He's not even going to announce a starter probably until, we see them run onto the field the first game of the season, kind of like what he did, Trey's rookie year. But a couple of things I wanted to say to you in preparation, I was thinking about this part of our conversation is that, like, it's exhausting, right? Like, I'm ready to, have an answer at quarterback, so many other teams, they have their guy, even if it's a bad guy, even if it's a guy that's not very good, they know who their quarterback's going to be. And it seems as if it's always kind of in flux with the Niners. I think that, Trey needs the reps, right? Like, but fair or unfair, because of the construction of the team, the success the team has had lately, I don't know that patience will be afforded to him. I think Dan Orlovsky tweeted the other day that since 2016, Trey's had like 420 live passes passes in a live game, and like there were like 20 quarterbacks this year that like did that. You know what I'm saying? So like on like this season or something like that or something. So like it's just I don't know the patience that's going to be needed to be afforded not only by the fans but by the team as well. Trey Lance may not be the beneficiary of that because we've seen what Brock's been able to do. Not saying that he's going to be necessarily the answer either. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen between year 1 and 2. But it brings up some other questions as to if that patience wasn't going to be afforded to Trey, knowing that he was raw and knowing that he needed development. Should they have kind of like, gone in that route of like, drafting a player like Trey, not necessarily Trey himself, but someone like that. So, but I foresee honestly, Trey probably being the guy going into the season, unless Brock just comes back in the beginning of August or whatever, hasn't missed a beat and actually looks even better. And Trey's not really having a good camp or having a good OTAs, or barring again injury or something. I think it's going to start off with Trey. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough for Trey, and I only say that because it seems like the locker room already has some like idea as to who they want as their quarterback. And when you're going up against that, that's kind of difficult. It was kind of the same thing with Jimmy Garoppolo, right? That Trey Lance had to contend with. And, the 49ers did right by Trey by having him be the starter last season anyway. And he just ended up getting hurt, and that was just unfortunate. But, I just wanted to point this quote out. Anonymous 49ers player said, "I think there would be a lot of pissed off people in this locker room if Brock Purdy is not the starter next year." Now, for one, I don't like statements like this because there's so much that can happen in months' time. Like, to your point, the timetable right now for Brock Purdy is to be healthy or 100% cleared around the 1st of August, maybe. Let's just say around then. And again, that's if everything goes well, no setbacks or anything at all. We're looking at, early August maybe. And again, anything can happen. What if he doesn't look like his old self right away? Is the same player going to think to himself, Brock Purdy should be the starter regardless? I mean, has Trey Lance looked that bad that we have people saying these things? I don't know. I think it's tough for Trey, and I feel for him. And also on the topic of the 49ers possibly not having the patience, right? Like they are a team that is ready to win now every year. And really the only thing in their way is the quarterback position, right? So they have to hit on who is the starter every year pretty much. And, the good thing is for Trey is that, again, he's going to get that opportunity. He's going to get that chance. And yeah, it only came about, this opportunity, because Brock Purdy suffered his injury, right? But that's how Brock Purdy got his opportunity, because Jimmy Garoppolo went down with injury. So that just kind of seems like the 49ers way. One guy gets hurt, and then some other quarterback steps in and becomes the guy that, we can look at several instances in 49ers history where that has happened, right? So maybe it's Trey Lance's turn to be able to do that. Now, will he? I don't know, but he has that chance. So he can't sit here and feel sorry for himself. And there's what John Lynch said about Trey Lance, that prove that he can stay healthy. That's true. I know some people took issue with John Lynch saying that. You got to remember that the NFL is a business. These NFL teams are in the business of winning football games. And if they can't depend on a guy to be healthy, mind you, this is the same reason that they moved on from Jimmy Garoppolo, because he couldn't stay healthy. The team liked Jimmy Garoppolo, right? The only reason they moved on from Jimmy Garoppolo is because he could not stay healthy. That's why they drafted Trey Lance, because they needed that insurance. Now they're looking at Trey Lance and wondering, could could this guy stay healthy too? I mean, I think those are fair questions, and all of his injuries have been different. They've happened differently. It hasn't just been because he's been running the football. I think that narrative is a little overblown. The latest one was because he ran the football, but even then, that's like kind of a freak injury. A guy falls on, your foot. So I don't know. It's tough for Trey. Feel bad for him, but he can't feel bad for himself. He has to look at this opportunity and say, this is my opportunity, maybe the only chance that I'm going to have once again to, prove that I could be the starting quarterback for this team. And again, he's going up against, these preconceived notions of what this team thinks Brock Purdy is, right? So he's up against a lot. But he can't sit here and feel sorry for himself. He's got to just prove that he can be the guy.
That's well said. I mean, I can't. Yeah, I agree with all of that. That was well said. I agree with you. I think that from seeing some of the discourse, you know what I'm saying? Like even in the media a little bit beyond just 49ers Twitter, I think some of the, concern that some people had in relation to kind of John Lynch's words. And we've seen other times where John Lynch kind of just starts shooting off the cuff and just, says things. And it's like, what do you mean? As it relates to, Trey Lance having to prove that he can stay healthy is, it's interesting, right? Because it's like, is it apples and apples or is it apples and oranges, right? Because, granted, I mean, technically, Brock Purdy got hurt twice this year, right? Had the bruised ribs and then, hurt his arm in that game. Granted, again, like I don't think it was because he wasn't protecting himself. Those things just kind of happened. And then they certainly, you're right. I think at the point in which when they were justifying moving up to get Trey Lance, first of all, that demonstrated that they were looking to move on beyond Jimmy Garoppolo. But then also after drafting Trey, or maybe it was after the season when they thought that Jimmy was going to move on, but they brought him back. He kind of spoke to, needing a quarterback that could stay healthy. But in the midst of Jimmy's, various injuries and such, I couldn't remember him making a comment like that. But to your point, though, I agree. You can't feel sorry for yourself. What's happened. All we've always heard is that Trey's got a good mindset. He's got a good head on his shoulders and such. Show that, demonstrate that, and get back out there on the field, get in the weight room, do what you got to do. He did say he wasn't working on his mechanics this offseason. I didn't bristle at that the same way that other people may have or some other people may have. But regardless, whether it's footwork or whatever, get back on the horse and show what you can do and show why you were drafted number 3 overall. Right? So,
yeah.
But I agree with you. I agree with what you said.
Yeah, because also on top of the fact that, Brock Purdy is going to spend much of the offseason, rehabbing, he is also not going to be Brock Purdy, that is, he won't be working on, mechanics. When you're rehabbing from an injury, all you're working on is getting back to 100%, right? Pre-injury. Yeah. So Brock Purdy is not going to have that opportunity to work on the mechanics or work on, little kinks that maybe he would have liked to after this season. Yeah. Trey Lance, on the other hand, he has an advantage here. Use it. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to feel bad for him. If he has this chance, just use it, So we'll see. That's all I have to say right now about the Purdy and Lance situation. I'm sure there'll be a lot more discussions to be had, in the coming months, and certainly through training camp and all that. And,
we'll have fun. One last thing about the QB, Steph, is I guess just going back to Jimmy real quick, looking at some of the squads that might be in the, market for a quarterback this year, for next year, including, the Commanders, the Bucks, and I think that's pretty much it that are on our schedule next year. So it's possible, if one of those teams land, Jimmy will play him next year. Not that I'm like scared of that, but I'm just simply saying that would be an interesting matchup. It would be a storyline. You know what I'm saying? Especially if it's back in Santa Clara. And of course, the Cardinals have an interesting quarterback situation right now. I don't see Jimmy wanting to go somewhere to be a bridge for when Kyler Murray comes back. But looking at the schedule, I think that the Bucks and Commanders, those are two prospective teams where he could land for a team that we would play next year.
The Commanders had reported interest in Jimmy Garoppolo.
Even before, you're right.
Yeah, like last offseason, maybe even the offseason before that.
Good
so
point.
I could definitely see those stars aligning for Jimmy Garoppolo to end up in Washington, but we'll just have to wait and see if the script writers are as good as we think they are. The NFL script writers, they are trying to get Jimmy Garoppolo to play the 49ers next season, right? So any one of those teams you mentioned would probably be a good option for, the drama. But look, let's look at free agency now, because that's like the next question on everyone's minds. What are the 49ers going to do with these free agents? They have time to mull it over. There's, like a month but before free agency period begins. March 15th is when it begins. So yeah, we're like a month away. And I would imagine at this point, there are some players who the 49ers know, like, we're not going to try to get you back. But I'm sure there's some that they would really like to have back. And I'm sure there are others where they're saying to themselves, we'd like to have you back under these conditions, under this price range or what have you. So those are the three tiers that I put free agents in. And so looking at this list, and sorry for the audio listeners, but we're looking at the list of free agents. There's a lot of them, right? Are there any here that you would say have to get this guy back?
So for me, I've been thinking about this as well. My hope is that Emmanuel Moseley can return to form. I would love to bring Moseley back. I think he was having a great season this year. I thought he had a great season last year, and unfortunately tore his ACL in Carolina. It would be great to get Emmanuel Moseley back. That could answer some questions as it relates to the secondary. Not having to necessarily fill a hole there, maybe just be, either drafting or acquiring, free agents for depth in that regard. I think that it's interesting. I think that if McGlinchey, this is going to be so funny saying this, if Mike McGlinchey can come back on a team-friendly deal, you know what I'm saying? It might be better to stick with the devil that right? And some people may not like the fact that I use that terminology, but Mike McGlinchey has his moments, right? But it's hard finding offensive linemen. It's hard on this. But that being said, they have a market, right? So there's going to be a team out there that's going to be bringing money for Mike McGlinchey. Now the reality is the answer for Mike McGlinchey's replacement might be on the team. So, I was kind of hesitant coming in this year, having not seen Talanoa Hufanga at safety very much. I'm like, they're not drafting a safety. What's going on? Every time a pick came up, but they believed in Talanoa, and he showed out to be an all-pro. So, he may be on the fringe, if it's a team-friendly deal, definitely bring him back. I think Azeez Al-Shaair wants to be the guy somewhere, and I think that's going to happen in Houston. I think it'd be interesting on Omenihu. I'll give you a couple more. I think on Omenihu, if the money is right, could be a good opportunity as well. I am not ready to cast off Robbie Gould. I think that he's not what he was in 2017, 2018, maybe 2019, but he's still relatively dependable. Maybe they let Robbie walk and go to try to get someone in either free agency or do someone like undrafted, get young and cheap at that position. And then looking at this list, if I had to pick one more, is it Jake Brendel? Yeah, Jake Brendel. I was surprised. He was a Pro Bowl alternate this year, right? So, if we're looking at him taking another step, into going into the next year, it's interesting. He went from being a journeyman, not really, latching on to a team, to being a Pro Bowl alternate this year. Had his moments sometimes, and getting a push, that kind of hurt the inside zone running game. But overall, when you're a Pro Bowl alternate, you're among the best of your peers in the league. And I will say that I feel like we took a little bit of a hit when Hassan Ridgeway tore his pectoral muscle.
Yes.
I'd be interested to see if there's mutual interest to bring Hassan Ridgeway back too, because even though he got healthy, I think with the game or two left in the season, I don't think we had enough IR call-ups
Right.
to use.
You were right.
So yeah, so those would, I know I think I gave you like 4 or 5 there, but those would be the ones that I would be like key on initially.
Those are all good ones. Emmanuel Mosley, I totally understand, because I do think at this point in time, the 49ers probably looking at corner and safety, because they need both in depth, right? And if Deshaun Gibson doesn't come back, then they need another starter at safety, right? Maybe they bring back Jimmy Ward, maybe they don't. To me, it doesn't sound like Jimmy Ward would come back. I mean, he's gonna have a market elsewhere, I think. And chase the bag, man. I mean, not many bags that come around in the NFL. So if Jimmy Ward wants, to have more money somewhere else, hey, go for it. But Emmanuel Mosley, I'd love to bring him back, and I'd feel pretty good about Charvarius Ward, Emmanuel Mosley as the 2 starters. And I feel good even about Deommodore Lenoir being like a backup now. I mean, after what he showed in the postseason, definitely seems to be a guy. Now, the other corners that they have, Ambry Thomas, some other guys, I feel like they'd still need to prove some things. Definitely think the 49ers would still have to bring in some depth. But, to your point, they can do that at free agency. They can do that in the draft as well.
I do have a question for you real quick, Steph. Have we seen Deommodore Lenoir play slot corner by any chance? Because if so,
we did very briefly.
Oh, okay. Because if so, maybe he can slide over in the event that Jimmy Ward leaves.
We did briefly.
Okay.
So Lenoir was playing nickel before Mosley got hurt, I think. Or
okay.
I don't remember, but I know he did play nickel, and that didn't last long because they started playing him on the outside.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my hot list. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I would like Ward to come back, but I don't think the money's going to be right. And one of the main reasons why I would like Ward to come back too is he's in his 9th year. And I know like the Niners, they honor their 10-year Niners. Their names are up in the stadium. They have a distinction and such, but it sounds like the money might not be right there. Some of the other, nice to haves, Jordan Willis might be a good depth piece. I know I actually thought that there was a possibility that the team would move Samson Ebukam last year to get picks for him before he hit free agency and potentially lose him. Granted, you would get, I guess, a compensatory pick, but I think he made like almost $10 million this year. So he would have to. I don't know the reality of him, taking a cheaper deal. Maybe he would, go somewhere else and get paid more. But if he takes a team-friendly deal, maybe he's in play as well to come back as a depth piece as well, potentially.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule that out. He'd be in my second tier, right, of guys that
exactly.
You'd bring back for the right price. I thought it was interesting you mentioned Hassan Ridgeway, because to me that's intriguing. And I did like Hassan Ridgeway a lot. I think he was disruptive up the middle, in the interior. And, Kinlaw, I don't know, at times it just seemed like he wasn't what we thought or hoped he would be on the interior of the defensive line. So having a guy like Hassan Ridgeway there, I think would be great. They need that because, if they don't bring Ridgeway back, then again, you're looking for one in free agency, or which there are some good options out there. There's Dron Payne from the Commanders. He would pretty penny, I think.
Yeah, I think he'd be pricey.
He's going to be the top defensive tackle out there. So, I don't see that happening for that reason. I know a lot of 49er fans are going to want it, but cost perspective, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. So Hassan Ridgeway suddenly looks like a good option, like a cheap option you can bring back, because he didn't show too much this season because he was dealing with that injury. It could be a nice deal where both sides can mutually agree, hey, let's just run this back, see what happens then. Omenihu, on the other hand, I feel like he might have priced himself out of the 49ers range, unless Ebukam walks and they make Omenihu that guy, right, that Ebukam was. But yeah, I think Omenihu might be gone. And especially because now you have two former 49ers, defensive coordinators out there in Saleh and now D'Amico who knows some of these guys and could poach them away for their own teams, right? That's always the issue. Also, on the offensive side, Mike McDaniel may like some of these pieces, right?
That's fair.
So that that's what they're up against now, and that's what makes the draft so much more important. You got to hit on your draft picks because you aren't always going to be able to bring free agents back, especially with the way the team is constructed, how much money they have allocated to their top players. Thankfully, it is their top players that they've spent the most money on, right? But you can't afford everyone at this stage, so yeah, they got to hit on those draft picks. But I'm excited for the draft, and for me, again, I think secondary positions are key. They're top of mind for the 49ers right now. Of course, that can change with the free agency period. But as of right now, I think the 49ers are looking at corners and safeties. And of course, they have to be looking at offensive linemen too, right? Like centers and right tackles, just in case, because you just never know if either of those, maybe even left tackle, right? Groom the next left tackle of the future for this team. So yeah, I mean, to me, those are the top. I know there's several other positions to look at. I mean, defensive tackle was one of them. And then also I would say tight end. I've been asking for a TE2 for a couple years now. I think you see the Chiefs got Noah Gray. I like Noah Gray, and I actually like Noah Gray, I think, for the 49ers, but the Chiefs got him. They got a nice little thing going with Kelsey and Noah Gray, and they're kind of grooming Gray to be like the Kelsey replacement, right? Big shoes to fill, but you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The 49ers could do the same for Kittle, right? So, and you never know. Maybe if the guy you bring to groom Kittle eventually is on similar level to Kittle and you feel good about moving forward, you got to be able to like move your money around. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like go into the next investment before, that one investment that you had starts to dip or crash. You always got to be thinking ahead. So tight end too is another position for me. Do you have any others or like positions that you're like the 49ers definitely need to draft this?
No, I don't really. You nailed them. I think it'll be interesting to see how it goes, right? And one thing as it relates to before we go into the draft, to your point, free agencies in March. I think that I like to consider myself pretty knowledgeable about football and who the playmakers are and even some of the role players are on most of the teams in the league. There are always like a few different defensive linemen that we acquire in free agency or sometime over the summer who I've never even heard of that actually become, they're turning into making big plays. Like I didn't know who Jordan Willis was before we traded for him in 2020 from the Jets. I didn't know Charles.
Even Menahue when they traded for Menahue.
So there's opportunity there too, so whether it's scouting, whether it's Kasarik, whether it had been Saleh or Ryans or Shanahan or whatever, like I have no doubt that they're going to have an eye for that talent. To bring over to be able to, fit the scheme, and then Kasarik, coach, hopefully he's still here, to coach him up. So, but yeah, we'll definitely see. I think we'll probably have a clearer view of what some of the draft needs will be after we see if they make any moves in free agency.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, we going to go live next Monday as well, Chris?
Oh, I'm about it. No, I'm about it.
Yeah,
for sure.
Let's go. All right. Because as we know, it's the off season, right? We may call it the slow season, but there is always something to talk about. So me and Chris are going to hold it down every Monday talking about the 49ers. And I'll see when I do my next episode, later this week, maybe when we hear who the new defensive coordinator is. But guys, the best way to know when my next live is going to be is to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. So recommend you guys do that. And as always, I appreciate you guys tuning in today. I appreciate you coming on today. And again, I'll talk to you next week. And have a good rest of your Monday afternoon, people. Peace.